The skies over New York City were a chaotic canvas of fire and ash. The Arcthal Dominion's ships hung in the atmosphere like vultures, raining destruction on a crumbling world. For over a decade, humanity had fought valiantly against the alien oppressors, but the endgame was now in motion. Earth's orbital defenses were gone, reduced to nothing more than a debris field circling the planet. The once mighty cities of Earth were fractured into scattered strongholds, each teetering on the edge of collapse. In the shadow of this devastation, Captain Alina Kor sat alone in a dimly lit interrogation room beneath one of Earth's last surviving military bases. Her once pristine uniform was replaced by a patched jacket and scuffed boots, a reflection of her fall from grace. The air in the room was thick with unspoken accusations, a tension broken only when the door creaked open. General Thomas Work entered, his presence commanding even without the formalities of his decorated coat. He studied Kor for a moment, his face etched with lines of exhaustion. "You've been lying low for a long time, Captain," he said, his tone measured but firm. "It's time to return to the fight." Kor leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "I didn't leave the fight. The fight left me." Work's jaw tightened, but he held back his anger. "We don't have the luxury for self-pity. Earth is dying. You want redemption? This is your chance." He slid a small data pad across the table. Kor picked it up, her eyes narrowing as she skimmed the contents. The screen displayed a series of schematics, each one more confusing than the last. Finally, her gaze locked onto two words that made her stomach drop: Silent Tide. "They're still going through with this?" Kor asked, her voice low but sharp. "Not just going through with it," Work replied. "We're accelerating it. The Dominion has deployed their final armada. If Silent Tide doesn't succeed, Earth will fall within weeks. We need someone who can lead this mission. Someone who knows what it means to make impossible choices." Kor's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "And you think I'm that someone? After what happened at the Titan offensive?" Work didn't flinch. "The Titan offensive was a failure, yes, but it wasn't your failure. You followed orders. You did what you could to save those people. This mission is different. You'll have the autonomy to act as you see fit. You'll be in command of the Silent Star, and you'll have the best team we can scrape together. It's humanity's only shot." For a long moment, Kor stared at the screen, weighing her options. The thought of returning to active duty churned her gut, but the images of burning cities and dying civilians haunted her more. Finally, she set the datapad down and met Work's gaze. "When do we leave?" The hangar bay of the underground military base hummed with activity, a stark contrast to the desolation above. Mechanics scrambled over fighter crafts and ground vehicles, their urgency palpable. At the center of it all, hidden under a web of camouflage netting and automated security drones, rested the Silent Star. Its sleek, matte black hull seemed to drink in the light, making the ship appear more like a shadow than a physical object. Captain Alina Kor stood at the edge of the hangar, staring at the vessel that would carry humanity's last hope. Beside her, General Work walked with a purposeful stride, his voice low but firm. "She's a prototype," Work explained, "built from scavenged Dominion tech and our brightest minds' innovations. Cloaking mechanisms, gravity distortion fields, and an AI core that makes it the smartest ship in the fleet. The Dominion won't see you coming until it's too late." Kor didn't respond immediately, her eyes fixed on the ship. "And if they do?" Work hesitated, then shrugged. "If they do, it's over. The Silent Star isn't built for firefights. Stealth is its only strength. That's why your team is critical." "Speaking of which," Kor said, turning to face him, "where's this best team you promised me?" Work smirked slightly. "Follow me." He led her deeper into the hangar, where 4 figures stood waiting. Kor's practiced eye swept over them, quickly assessing each one. First was Dr. Aiden Velasquez, a wiry man in his mid-30s with an unkempt mop of hair and a nervous energy that made him seem perpetually on edge. He was fiddling with a datapad, muttering calculations under his breath. Rourke gestured to him. Velasquez designed the destabilizers. He's the only one who fully understands their capabilities and their flaws. Velasquez glanced up, giving Core a quick nod. Just, don't shake them too hard. They tend to detonate under stress. Core raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Next was Sergeant Rena Tova, a towering woman with a scar running across her cheek. She stood at parade rest, her expression cold and unreadable. Rourke's tone softened as he introduced her. Tova's the best ground forces operative we've got. She's seen more combat than anyone in this hangar. Tova's piercing gaze met Core's. There was no nod of respect, no greeting, only a sharp, unspoken message. Don't make me regret this. Lieutenant Sam Oren, Rourke continued, nodding to a wiry young man leaning casually against a supply crate. His uniform was unbuttoned at the collar, and a cocky grin played on his lips. Your pilot, he's reckless, but no one flies better under pressure. Oren gave a mock salute. Reckless? I prefer the term creative. Finally, Core's eyes landed on Xariel, a tall, reptilian alien with sharp features and a shimmering blue crest. The Dominion defector stood slightly apart from the others, his posture tense. And this, Rourke said, is our inside man. Xariel was a Dominion tactician before he turned against them. He knows their patterns, their weaknesses. You'll need his intel to get anywhere near their fleets. Core crossed her arms. And why should I trust him? Xariel's voice was smooth but firm, his galactic standard near perfect. You shouldn't, but trust or not, I want the Dominion to burn as much as you do. If you're looking for guarantees, Captain, you've come to the wrong species. The room fell silent for a moment as Core looked each team member in the eye. They were an odd assortment of individuals, united only by desperation and the faint hope of victory. All right, Core finally said. I don't need you to like me or each other. I need you to follow orders and stay alive. We leave in 24 hours. Don't make me regret this. As the team dispersed to prepare, Core turned back to the Silent Star, her jaw tight. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders again. She wasn't sure if the ship was a miracle or a death sentence. But either way, it was their only chance. The Silent Star slipped through the cosmos like a phantom, invisible to the Dominion's watchful eyes. Its engines hummed softly as the ship's cloaking field distorted the light around it, rendering it a ghost among the stars. Captain Alina Core paced the bridge, her boots clicking softly against the cold metal floor. She had no illusions about the mission. It was a gamble, and the stakes were humanity's survival. The crew, however, wasn't nearly as confident. Their faces betrayed the fear that hung over them like a storm cloud. Entering Dominion space in 5 minutes, Lieutenant Sam Oren's voice crackled through the intercom. His relaxed demeanor earlier had evaporated. Now he was all business, his fingers dancing over the controls. Core stood by the main viewport, gazing at the darkness ahead. The familiar red glow of a Dominion patrol fleet blinked in the distance, distant yet menacing. They were within range. Status check, Core commanded. Dr. Aiden Velasquez, who had been hunched over his equipment, looked up. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights spent calibrating the destabilizers. The destabilizers are ready, he said, his voice strained. I've set the parameters. Just, don't expect them to work flawlessly. They might. Hiccup. Sergeant Rena Tova, standing in the corner, crossed her arms. What kind of hiccups are we talking about? Velasquez's eyes darted nervously from Tova to Core, the kind that sends us straight to the void if we're unlucky. Core's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. She turned toward the tactical display, where Xariel stood, studying the Dominion fleet patterns. His calm demeanor had not wavered since the team boarded the ship, but Core knew better than to trust his poker face. His past was as murky as the space they were about to navigate. "Tell me what I'm seeing." "Surreal," Kor said, keeping her voice level. Exariel straightened and tapped a few keys on the console. The display updated with a series of glowing dots, each representing a Dominion fleet. They've grouped their forces in a tight formation, likely to minimize detection of anything moving through the system. But they're relying heavily on automated systems to patrol. "We can slip through if we're careful." "Careful?" Tova snorted. "We're about to drop a destabilizer on them. How careful do you expect us to be?" Zariel's cold gaze flickered to Tova, but he held his tongue. Kor didn't need internal squabbles right now. "Orin, take us in," she ordered. "Velasquez, stand by. Everyone else, prepare for the drop." The silent star glided forward, the ship's cloaking technology working overtime to keep them hidden. Kor felt a tightness in her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced since her first command. The air on the bridge was thick with tension. As they neared the target fleet, the first signs of trouble appeared. A Dominion frigate, its sensors scanning in tight arcs, passed dangerously close to their position. Orin's hands flew over the controls, his voice steady despite the danger. "Give me a second. Just need to time this right," he muttered. The frigate's path shifted slightly, almost as if it sensed something was amiss. "Now, Orin," Kor barked. With a final deft maneuver, Orin swung the ship sharply, using the gravitic distortion field to twist the silent star out of the frigate's line of sight. The ship rocked slightly as they slipped past undetected. "I don't like how close that was," Velasquez muttered, his fingers trembling on the destabilizer controls. "We need to deploy soon, or we won't make it out of here alive." "Noted," Kor said, her eyes locked on the fleet ahead. "We deploy now, or we all die here." Orin nodded, his gaze still fixed on the tactical readout. "We're almost in range." "Ready the destabilizer," Kor ordered. The countdown began, and for a brief moment, time seemed to slow. Kor could feel the weight of history bearing down on her. This mission, this team, this moment, everything was riding on the next few minutes. She stared ahead, watching as the fleet of Dominion ships grew closer, unaware of the storm about to hit them. The hum of the silent star filled the otherwise tense silence on the bridge as Kor's gaze fixed on the tactical display. The time had come. They were in position, the destabilizer primed and ready. The Dominion fleet loomed ahead, massive and unyielding. Each ship was a fortress, bristling with weapons and defense systems. Their automated patrols had been fooled by the ship's cloaking tech, so far, but Kor knew their luck would run out soon. "Deploying destabilizer in 3, 2, 1. Velasquez's voice was quiet, almost reverent, as his hands worked rapidly over the console. A sudden jolt rippled through the silent star, and the destabilizer released into the heart of the Dominion fleet. The destabilizer's gravity distorters activated with a low, menacing hum, sending shockwaves through the enemy formations. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen, and then the first explosion lit up the dark void of space like a supernova. The destabilizer had done its job. Ships began to lose control, their gravity fields malfunctioning, causing them to spin uncontrollably. The usually well-coordinated Dominion fleet was thrown into disarray as its massive ships collided with each other, incapacitated by the gravity fields. Kor's lips curled into a tight smile as she watched the chaos unfold on the monitors. "Captain, we've done it!" Velasquez exclaimed, barely able to mask the relief in his voice. But Kor knew better. The Dominion didn't crumble that easily. "Stay sharp. We're not out of this yet," she ordered. The silent star lurked in the shadow of the chaos, cloaked, waiting. A few seconds later, the first wave of Dominion reinforcements dropped out of warp, their massive warships appearing out of nowhere. They were too late to save the fleet, but not too late to retaliate. "Shit," Orin cursed, his eyes scanning the tactical display. "They've already detected us. We're about to get company." The crew braced themselves as enemy ships began to scan the space around them, looking for any sign of life. It wouldn't take long for them to figure out the Silent Star was the source of their fleet's disarray. "That's our cue to leave," Kor said, the command sharp. She whirled toward Velasquez. "Can you keep the destabilizer working long enough to cover our escape?" Velasquez's eyes widened in panic. I can try, but it wasn't designed to last long. It's unstable. The next wave could cause a catastrophic malfunction." Tova was already moving toward the weapons storage area, her heavy boots pounding the floor. "How long do we have?" she called over her shoulder. "Not long," Velasquez answered. "Maybe 30 minutes. An hour if we're lucky." Kor's mind raced. Their best chance was to escape before the Dominion could launch a full retaliation. But escaping meant running straight into the teeth of the Dominion fleet, who would now be hunting them in earnest. If they didn't move fast, the Silent Star wouldn't make it out alive. "Orin," Kor snapped, "take us through the debris field. We'll use the wreckage to hide our signature. Get us to that asteroid belt. I want the Dominion thinking we're dead in space." Orin didn't hesitate. "You got it. Hold on, everyone." The Silent Star lurched forward as Orin gunned the engines, weaving through the wreckage of the disabled Dominion fleet. The debris was vast and chaotic, but it provided them cover, at least for now. Kor's eyes stayed locked on the screens, watching as the Dominion ships moved into pursuit, too focused on the wreckage to realize the true threat still lingered in the shadows. "Exareal," Kor called, turning to the alien tactician. "What's the fastest road out?" The Real's sharp eyes narrowed as he studied the star charts. "There's a narrow channel in the asteroid belt, just wide enough for us to pass through. But it's treacherous. If we're spotted, we won't survive long enough to get to the other side." Kor's fingers drummed on the arm of her chair. The odds were slim, but they didn't have a choice. They had to take that route. "Do it," she ordered. Orin grinned. "You're sure you want to let me drive through an asteroid field, Captain?" Kor's lips twitched into a small smile, a flicker of confidence. "No one else can do it better." The Silent Star rocketed toward the asteroid field, the rumble of engines and the whir of the cloaking device filling the tense silence. They were running out of time. The Silent Star had accomplished its mission, but the hardest part was still ahead: escape with the Dominion hot on their tail. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a swirling mass of rock and debris that could either shield them or crush them into oblivion. The Silent Star dove into the chaos, its cloaking field flickering as it adjusted to the gravitational anomalies surrounding the asteroids. Kor felt the ship shudder as Orin expertly maneuvered through the shifting rocks, narrowly avoiding collisions by mere meters. "Keep it steady, Orin," Kor said, her voice calm but firm. She didn't need to remind him. He was already operating at the limit of his skills, pushing the Silent Star to the edge of its capabilities. The Dominion fleet had detected them, but the debris and the ship's advanced cloaking tech had bought them time. However, the pursuers were closing in, their sensors now tuned to the faintest fluctuations in the space around them. They couldn't hide forever. "We've got incoming," Tova reported from the rear. She was watching the sensors, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of the enemy. 2 Dominion cruisers, closing fast. Kor's stomach tightened. If the cruisers caught up to them, the Silent Star wouldn't stand a chance in open combat. It was time to take a risk, the kind of move that could either save them or destroy them. "Orin, get us into that gravitational anomaly," Kor ordered, pointing to a massive asteroid cluster near the center of the field. It was a maze of gravity wells and unstable rock, but it was their best chance of losing the enemy. "You sure about that, Captain?" Orin asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "That's a death trap." "Do it," Kor snapped, her patience running thin. "We're running out of options." Orin didn't hesitate. He guided the Silent Star into the anomaly with all the finesse he could muster. The ship groaned as it passed through the turbulence, the gravity wells pulling at the vessel from all directions. For a moment, the stars outside the viewport seemed to blur and stretch as the ship contended with the forces at play. Inside, the crew gripped their seats, the whine of the ship's stress systems reverberating through the walls. "Hold on," Orin shouted, barely able to keep the ship under control as it bucked and twisted through the asteroid field. The silent star plunged deeper into the chaos, the sound of its engines straining to maintain speed. The enemy cruisers, more massive and less maneuverable, struggled to follow. Their sensors pinged frantically as they tried to track the elusive silent star, but the anomaly's interference was like a cloak within the cloak, masking their presence. For a brief moment, it seemed as though they might escape, the pursuers falling behind. But then, a violent shudder rocked the ship. "Warning!" Velasquez yelled, his face pale. "The destabilizer! Something's wrong!" The destabilizer had been running on borrowed time, and now it was malfunctioning. The destabilizing field had begun to fluctuate wildly, threatening to send the ship tumbling into an uncontrolled gravity well. The ship lurched again, this time in the opposite direction, as if the very space around them was fighting back. "Stabilizers offline. We're losing control." Orin's voice cracked as he fought to keep the silent star from spinning out of orbit. Cor gritted her teeth. "Velasquez, can you fix it?" The scientist was already at work, sweat dripping down his brow as he ran diagnostics. "I can try, but I need—" A deep rumble filled the ship. "Captain, we've got incoming," Tova shouted, her voice tense with urgency. Cor turned to see two Dominion destroyers emerging from the cloud of asteroids, their weapons charging for a direct assault. They had found them. "We don't have time for repairs," Cor said, her voice a razor's edge. "Orin, evasive maneuvers, now." Orin yanked the controls, sending the silent star into a sharp roll. The ship careened toward the side of an asteroid, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire from the destroyers. The blast grazed the ship's outer hull, sending sparks flying from the console. "Shields are holding, barely," Velasquez shouted from the back. "We can't keep this up for much longer." Orin yelled, his knuckles white on the controls. Cor's mind raced. The silent star was their last hope, but it was quickly becoming a death trap. Their best chance at survival now lay in one final desperate move, taking the fight to the Dominion, a gamble that could either destroy their enemies or wipe them out entirely. "We're going to make a stand," Cor said, her voice cold and commanding. Tova, Velasquez, and Xariel all turned toward her in surprise. "What are you suggesting?" Tova asked, her voice low. "We're going to activate the backup weapon systems," Cor said, her eyes narrowing. "It's a long shot, but if we disable their destroyers, we can make our way to the outer rim and slip past them." Velasquez swallowed hard. The weapons haven't been tested. They could malfunction like the destabilizer. "Do it anyway," Cor said, her jaw set. "If we don't fight back, we're dead." Orin's hands flew across the controls. "Hold on to your seats. This is going to be wild." With that, Cor braced for the storm that was about to unfold. The silent star had one last shot at survival, and it was up to them to take it. The ship shook violently as the silent star rocketed through the asteroid field, narrowly avoiding the deadly flurry of fire from the Dominion destroyers. Orin's hands gripped the controls with the intensity of a man trying to outrun death itself. The backup weapon systems, untested and only partially functional, hummed to life with a soft, mechanical whine. A blinking red light on the console signaled the weapon was online. "We've got one shot at this," Cor said, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. "Orin, keep us moving. Tova, Velasquez, prepare for everything to go sideways." Tova, standing by the rear door, checked her pulse rifle one last time and nodded. "Ready, Captain." "Xariel, any advice?" Cor turned to the alien tactician, who had been unusually quiet. Kazariel's amber eyes flickered toward the Dominion destroyers closing in. Their ships rely heavily on their shields. If we can breach them, even a little, the rest of their hulls will crumble under our fire. But the weapon systems you're activating, they're primitive, untested. There's no telling how effective they will be. I don't care how primitive they are, Kor snapped, her voice tight with resolve. They're our only option. We fight, or we die. Kazariel's lips parted in a rare smile, his sharp teeth glinting. Then, let us fight. Without another word, Oren sent the Silent Star into a deep roll, positioning the ship behind a massive asteroid to use as cover. The two Dominion destroyers were too close now, their weapons locked and ready to strike. They'd been tracking them with the precision of hunters, but they hadn't anticipated the Silent Star daring to strike back. Targeting locked, Velasquez called out, his fingers trembling over the controls. Firing in 3, 2. The first shot from the backup weapon systems roared to life, a surge of crackling energy, barely contained, shot from the hull of the ship. The blast hit one of the Dominion destroyers square in the middle of its shield barrier, sending ripples of blue light across the ship's surface. For a second, nothing happened. Then the shields buckled under the intense force, like a paper being torn apart, and the ship's hull buckled. Sparks and debris flew off the outer layer, and the destroyer's shields flickered erratically. Yes, Velasquez cheered, but his excitement was short-lived. It worked, but just barely. We need more power. The second destroyer fired back, its laser beams slashing through the debris-filled void. The Silent Star rocked from the impact, its hull groaning under the strain. Kor gritted her teeth. Oren, take us in close. Give them no room to breathe. Oren grinned, all traces of fear gone. You got it. He whipped the ship around in a risky move, dodging another blast from the second destroyer as they dove into the center of the asteroid field. The space around them seemed to explode with danger, debris, and shattered asteroids constantly threatening to tear the ship apart. But it was the perfect environment for the Silent Star to hide in, moving between giant rock formations like a phantom. They're not going to give up, Tova said, her voice grim. We need to finish them now. Kor's eyes stayed fixed on the tactical display, watching the first destroyer flicker on the edge of destruction. Velasquez, do we have enough power for one more shot? Velasquez bit his lip, then nodded reluctantly. Maybe, but the destabilizer is about to blow. If we fire again, it could take the whole system offline. Kor's mind raced. They didn't have time to deliberate. With the enemy destroyers closing in and no way to outrun them, they had no choice but to gamble everything on one final attack. Do it, one shot. We either win here or we die trying. The Silent Star shuddered again as the backup systems fired once more. This time, the blast struck the first destroyer dead on, tearing through the weakened shield and punching deep into the ship's hull. The ship began to break apart, the core detonating in a brilliant explosion that sent shockwaves through the field. Kor felt a brief moment of triumph, but it was short-lived. The second destroyer, furious and now fully aware of the threat, immediately focused its weapons on the Silent Star. It fired in a devastating arc, and Kor saw the explosion coming, but there was nowhere to run. Brace for impact, Kor yelled, her heart hammering in her chest. Time seemed to stretch as the blast raced toward them. At the last possible second, Oren veered hard, twisting the ship to narrowly dodge the lethal shot. The blast tore through a nearby asteroid, sending shards of rock hurtling through space. One large piece scraped across the ship's hull, leaving a deep gouge, but the Silent Star remained intact. They had survived, for now. Kor exhaled slowly. Keep us moving. We don't stop until we reach the rim. The crew was quiet, each one still processing the enormity of what they'd just done. They had won the first round, but the Dominion would be relentless in their pursuit. They had made it this far, but could they survive what was to come? The Silent Star was alive with the hum of its systems, the ship barely holding together after the brutal battle. Every jolt, every minor tremor, sent a fresh wave of anxiety through the crew. The aftermath of their gambit left them battered but not broken, and the silence that followed was thick with the weight of their narrow escape. Kor stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes locked on the tactical readout. The wreckage of the first Dominion destroyer flickered in the distance, its remains drifting like a shattered husk. The second was still on their tail, relentless, but it was wounded, struggling to maintain its velocity as it limped after them. "How much longer until the next wave?" Kor asked, her voice steady but the undercurrent of urgency unmistakable. Oren ran a quick calculation on his console, his fingers flying across the touchpad. 20 minutes, maybe less. The Dominion are already calling in reinforcements. His voice faltered slightly. We can't outrun them forever. Kor's mind raced. The next fleet that arrived would be their doom if they didn't find a way to throw off their pursuers for good. She turned to Tova, whose face had hardened into a mask of grim determination. "We need a safe haven, a place where we can disappear." Tova nodded. "I know a place. There's an old mining colony on the outer rim, deserted, forgotten. We can hide there long enough to regroup, but it's risky. The Dominion will have no trouble finding it once they start sweeping the sector." "Risk is all we have left," Kor said, her tone biting. She glanced at Velasquez, who was still working furiously at his station, trying to keep the destabilizer from imploding. "How much longer until the destabilizer fails completely?" Kor asked, dreading the answer. Velasquez didn't look up from his screen. "Maybe 10 minutes. It's shot, Captain. I can't fix it, at least not while we're moving at this speed." "Understood," Kor muttered. "We'll make do with what we have." Azrael, who had been watching the situation unfold with his usual stoic demeanor, spoke up. "The Dominion will come for us, Captain. There is no escaping them. They will sweep this sector with everything they have, and once they find us, they will not stop until we are destroyed." Kor's eyes narrowed. "We don't have the luxury of sitting around and waiting for them to catch up. We're going to make it to that mining colony. Once we're there, we make our stand. They may be able to track us, but they won't expect us to fight back." Oren glanced at her, the stress from the earlier chase still visible on his face. "You want us to fight a full Dominion fleet with nothing but a busted destabilizer and a dying ship?" Kor's gaze was unwavering. "We're not going to fight them directly. The idea is to make them think we're too dangerous to approach, that we've turned the tables. If we can create enough of a diversion, we can slip away, hide in the dark for a while longer. This isn't about defeating them outright, it's about survival." Tova gave a sharp nod. "If we're going to do it, we need to set up traps on the ground. The mining colony has enough old equipment lying around that we could make some improvised weapons, something to buy us time while we figure out our next move." Kor turned her gaze to the window, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The cold, empty void seemed endless, but within that silence there was a chance for humanity's survival, a chance to fight back. "Oren, get us to the colony," Kor commanded. "Now. We've got 10 minutes to prepare for what's coming." The ship lurched forward, engines roaring to life as Oren pushed the Silent Star into high gear, speeding toward the farthest reaches of the outer rim. As they approached the mining colony, Kor took one last look at the crew. The tension on the bridge was palpable, but beneath the fear and uncertainty, there was something else. A bond forged in battle, a determination to survive against all odds. "This is our chance," Kor said, her voice quiet but resolute. "We either make it through this, or we go down fighting. We fight for every minute, every second we have left. Let's give them a reason to remember humanity." Her words, simple as they were, carried weight. In that moment, the crew of the Silent Star understood. The next battle wouldn't be just about the ship, it would be about them. about proving that humanity could face the impossible and come out on top. The mining colony loomed ahead, a shadow in the distance, and with it, the promise of a final stand. The silent star descended into the mining colony's atmosphere, the ship shuddering as it passed through layers of thick dust and shifting winds. The settlement, abandoned for decades, appeared as nothing more than a scattering of rusted structures and broken equipment. Core had chosen it for its isolation, its seclusion, and its decayed defenses, which they would now repurpose. Inside the ship, the crew was already preparing for the fight of their lives. The atmosphere on the bridge was tense as Orin guided the vessel through the final stretch of their descent. Every second that passed, Core could feel the clock ticking down. The Dominion would arrive soon, and when they did, it would be a hunt. But Core wasn't going to make it easy for them. "We're entering the colony's perimeter," Orin called out, his voice strained as the ship bucked in the turbulent atmosphere. "I'll land in the abandoned mine shaft. It's the best cover we've got." Core nodded, her mind already calculating their next move. "Everyone, suit up. This is going to get messy." Tova, Velasquez, and Surreal were already moving, gathering their gear. Tova checked her pulse rifle and nodded to Core. "We've got limited ammo, but I've rigged a few things. If we need to, we can set traps in the tunnels." Azrael had been silent for the most part, but now his eyes burned with determination. "Let them come. They will not expect us to fight with such ferocity. We must strike from the shadows, hit them where it hurts." Core met his gaze, her heart steady. "We're not here to win the war. We're here to make sure they know humanity is not to be underestimated." The silent star settled on the cracked earth of the mining colony. The landing gears screeched as they made contact with the ground. Orin quickly powered down the engines, and the crew began moving toward the exit. The air outside was dry, the ground covered in dust and scattered debris from long-forgotten mining operations. The colony's walls loomed like tombstones, silent, cold, and lifeless. It was the perfect place for an ambush. Core led the crew through the narrow streets, taking cover behind abandoned storage containers and old machinery. They split up, each member taking their assigned positions. Tova rigged explosives near the colony's entrance, while Velasquez worked on using the remaining tech from the Silent Star to create a jamming field that would disrupt the Dominion's sensors. Exareal moved into position, silently making his way to a vantage point from which he could observe the entire layout. Core kept watch over it all, her mind focused. She knew the Dominion would be on them soon. The first wave would likely come in fast, expecting to overwhelm them with sheer numbers and firepower, but they had no idea what was waiting for them. Moments later, the first Dominion ships broke through the atmosphere, their sleek forms cutting through the sky. Core's pulse quickened as she checked the comms. "Ready?" she asked, her voice cool but sharp. "Ready." Tova's voice came through first, followed by the sounds of Velasquez and Azrael confirming their readiness. "Then let's give them a surprise they won't forget." The Dominion dropships hit the ground hard, kicking up clouds of dust as their landing gears groaned. The first squad of Dominion soldiers exited, their armor gleaming under the dying light of the twin suns. They moved in tight formations, weapons raised as they spread out to secure the area. Core's breath hitched. The moment of truth had arrived. "Now," she barked. Tova hit the detonator. Explosions rocked the ground, sending debris flying. The Dominion forces were thrown into chaos as the first wave of traps triggered, crude but effective, taking out the front lines with brutal efficiency. The remaining soldiers scrambled, trying to get their bearings. But that was when Sariel struck. From his elevated position, the alien tactician unleashed a barrage of precision shots that took out key Dominion officers, creating disarray in their ranks. The soldiers were no longer coordinated. They were just targets. Core and her team moved fast, utilizing the cover of the colony's rusted buildings and the tunnels that led deep underground. The Dominion soldiers, despite their superior technology, were now fighting blind. They had underestimated the cunning of the humans. "Keep the pressure on," Kor ordered. "Push them back. Don't give them room to breathe." The battle raged on, the Dominion forces scrambling to adjust to the unexpected resistance. Explosions, gunfire, and the roar of the Silent Star's remaining weapons filled the air. Every corner of the mining colony was a battleground now. The crew of the Silent Star fought as if their lives depended on it, because they did. With every passing minute, Kor felt the Dominion's presence tightening, but she also saw cracks in their strategy. The jamming field was working, their communications were scattered, and their sensors were compromised. They couldn't coordinate, couldn't see beyond their immediate surroundings. As Kor and Tova pushed deeper into the heart of the colony, a realization set in. The Dominion weren't going to win this fight. The odds were stacked against them, but humanity had proven time and again that when pushed to the brink, they would fight back with everything they had. When the last Dominion soldier fell, the crew of the Silent Star stood victorious, bloodied, battered, but alive. They had won the battle, and with it, humanity had sent a message. They were not a species to be underestimated.